Hey guys, welcome to Bethel Online. My name is Jason. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're so glad you decided to make us a part of your weekend. No matter who you are, where you come from, we're so glad you're here. Our vision is to be a safe place for real people to encounter the real Jesus and experience real change. Our hope and our prayer is that no matter who you are or what you've been through, you know that you are loved and you are wanted here. We would love to get to know you better and help you connect with all that's going on. You can do this by going to our website at www.bethel.us or by downloading the Bethel app. You can find our app by searching Bethel Putco in your app store. Both online and in the app, you can fill out digital connection card. It only takes a minute and it'll help us know how to serve you better. Another way you can connect today is through giving. Your generosity at Bethel directly impacts God's mission to radically change people's lives in Putnam County and beyond. Through the ministries of Bethel and the many local and regional organizations we support, people are able to see the grace of God and how much He loves them. You can always give on our website at bethel.us/give or in the Bethel app. Thank you for partnering with us and making a difference. Well, thanks again for tuning in online today. Know that you are wanted and welcome here, and you are loved. I hope you all have a great day.
Good morning and welcome to Bethel. Welcome to week 3 in our series called Identity. What we believe about who we are will lead to all of the behavior that is to follow. What you believe about you will impact how you live your life. During this series, we've talked about how God is actually the source of our identity. In our culture, we often seem to believe that our identity is what we do. But the scriptures teach that our identity is actually in whose we are. Remember when you were a kid and your teacher would ask, or someone would ask you, your grandparents would ask you, what do you want to be? As a dad, when my little boy was little, he would get these little encyclopedias delivered every so often, and they were the Animal Planet animal encyclopedias. And he would get one, and they would be 50 pages each month for like 12 months. And there would be 50 new creatures, and they would be 2 to 3 pages on each creature. And he would pore over these with every bit of his energy. And he would tell me one week he wanted to be an entomologist and he wanted to study bugs. And the next week he wanted to be a zoologist. And then the next week he would want to study the creatures of the sea, and that he wanted to serve in some way in these fields. And it's been fun as a dad to watch him develop. And even now, as my kids get older, as they get closer to this point of deciding what they will be, which when we ask that question in our culture, we're usually asking what they will do. And it's been fun to watch. And I think in my own life, I think this question, what do you want to be, is a powerful question. We often shift because after all, in our culture, we're often obsessed with what people do. We have this mindset that our activity equals our identity. And we felt this in school, right? Like, what do you do? Tell me, like, what do your kids do? Do your kids do anything? And you can tell me, oh, they're a baseball player, they're a football player, they're on an academic team, or like they study, or they put together models. And we often, when we're asked what we do, we talk about these activities as though they're a part of our identity. Even now, if you were to go grab coffee and mill around a group of people, you might begin to ask the question, what do you do? And in reality, you're not asking about, like, you brush your teeth and you take a shower and you go for a morning run. You're really asking people, like, what do you do? Because we're trained in this culture to believe that what you do is who you are, that your activity equals your identity, that what you do is who you are. But there's a problem with this way of thinking. Number one, God's not in the equation. In this particular way of looking at things, God is left out. What does God say that you are? How were you made by the one who called you into being and knit you together in your mother's womb? It's problematic to leave the Creator who made us and defined us out of the answer of who we are and what we do. Number two, if you maintain this philosophy that what you do is who you are, there will never be enough to suffice when it comes down to your identity and who you want to be. Week one, we talked about God giving us our identity as a masterpiece through the grace of His Son, Jesus, that we are a masterpiece. Week two, we saw that Paul was saying that we are an ambassador for Christ, that these are a part of our very identity. It's a part of the identity of those who are following Jesus to be a masterpiece that God has created and an ambassador for the reconciliation of people to God. Today, I want to talk to you about your identity as a person of God. If you've chosen to follow Jesus like His disciples had, then your identity is in being one of His people. It's not so much in the job that you do or the groups that you fit. Your identity is connected to Him. Our world is obsessed with what you do. We buy newspapers so we can find out personal information about the lives of celebrities. We watch TV shows, and no part of the news is better than the part where you listen to the stories of people that you broadly know on a more personal level, so that you know what are the lifestyles of the rich and famous. What do those people do differently? Books are sold, instructional videos made on the basis of our desire to understand what others do. Our world is obsessed with what you do. I think it would be incredibly fun to put a group of people together for an entire weekend and make one rule. You cannot tell what you do. To see how people would figure out they would group up or how they would connect, and how much more we might actually connect to people if we didn't so much have our identity in what we do and try to place other people's identity on the things that they do. And here's the thing. Our world's obsessed with what you do, but God cares about who you are. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, Jesus is with His disciples. These are people who are already following Him. In earlier sermons in the series, we said that when we choose to follow Jesus, our identity changes. And Jesus is beginning to teach His followers what it will be like to follow Him, what His people are like. And so as these disciples from various backgrounds come together, Jesus begins to teach. He tells them, you're the salt of the earth. I mean, that's a weird identifying statement. It's a descriptive statement, but let's be honest. We use the phrase salt as there's salt in the wound. Salt is of value. Salt adds flavor. Salt preserves. When Jesus says you're the salt of the earth, those things can all be implied in what He wants from His followers, or who His followers are supposed to be. He says, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You're made to be His people. Useful, valuable. And while we can include those thoughts, as Jesus says we're the salt, there's something interesting that I learned this week for the first time in my life. That during Jewish sacrifices, one of the final steps that the rabbi took during sacrifice was to sprinkle salt on top of the sacrifice. At the dinner table in Jewish homes, as they began to eat, they would often sprinkle salt even on the bread at the table. Not just because salt tastes good and salt preserves, and there are some flavor effects that go along with it, and there's also some nutritional need for it. But even though the salt would fall off the bread, it was a reminder to God's people in the Old Testament that they were his people. This isn't a new thing that's being taught. This is being taught to God's people in the Old Testament through the covenants and the sacrifices to remind them they were God's people. When we identify as God's masterpiece or God's ambassador, in this scripture, Jesus is reminding us to identify first and foremost as his people. Not so much to identify with all the things of the world and the things that we do and the behaviors and activities we take part in, but to identify as his chosen people. So when he says, you're the salt of the world, yes, we should be valuable and add to the world around us and to preserve the message of his gospel, but we're to ultimately act out of the knowledge that we are his people. A few years ago, I went to visit the place where my grandparents lived when I was a kid, and I went with a friend, and when I got there to their place, they don't live there anymore, and the people who live there, while their family I had never met before, but across the road was my dad's cousin's house. And we got there, and all of a sudden dogs are running across the road, and I'm kind of nervous about, do these people even know why my pretty new car is sitting here? And so I yelled across the road, I'm Manning Couch's grandson and Grant Couch's son. And immediately the man welcomed me across the road. The reality is that the identity that I shared there was the connection that I had to them, and it gave me a different ability to be there. When Jesus says, you are the light of the world, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. In Matthew chapter 5:14, when he says you're the light of the world, we know that light is stronger than darkness, that where light is, it's safer to be. In Jesus' day, the disciples would have related this to the city of Jerusalem. Like many places in the world, like Beverly Hills, the rich are inside the walls and the poor are on the outside. And that the poor in Jerusalem would rely on the lights of the city inside to light their existence outside. But when Jesus is telling the people to be the light of the world, he also knew that when those people would come under attack, they would rely upon the gates being opened and the people moving toward the light to become safe. He also recognized that the people on the outside of the city would be relying on the people on the inside of the city for the resources to survive. And when he tells his people, you're to be a light of the world and a city on a hill, he's telling them that part of your identity is in the fact that you're my kid in my city, and there is a world of people who need the light. You are God's people. I want you to know this morning that if you've never taken on that identity, God offers, as he calls us, to come and follow him. He told the disciples, come and follow me and I'll make you what you need to be. I'll help you do what you need to do. The reality of the story is that our identity as being God's people will drive us to strive to be the salt that adds flavor. It will drive us to be the salt that preserves the truth. It will drive us to live by what God has called us to. You are God's people. You're the light of the world, and you're not to hide that you're the light of the world. It says, people do not light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. That we're to be light to a world that has much darkness. It's a dark thing that we have a world where our identity is wrapped up in what we do or where we live. Or, when I was growing up, I grew up in the Mineral Springs neighborhood in Columbus, just a little subdivision literally out in a field. And all of the kids that I grew up with, we went to the same little elementary school, Rock Creek Elementary School. And we then went on to Northside Junior High School. And then from there, we went to East High School. And when we got to junior high school, all of us went to that junior high school, and almost all of us went to the same high school. But many of the kids we went to junior high school with went to the other high school in our town. Interestingly enough, because we had this connection as being Mineral Springs kids and Rock Creek kids, even though we grew up and got bigger and the community we were in was bigger, part of our identity was wrapped up with we were Mineral Springs kids. We were from that side of town and that part of the community. It's interesting, although we all grew up, went to high school and had different friends, and some of us kind of stuck together, the reality is we all kind of went our separate ways. But as I look on social media and now all these years later, the kids who we seem to notice when someone's parents pass away or we notice, and it's because of that tie that we have as Rock Creek kids, that tie that we have as that little neighborhood. And the reality is that we are to see our identity as whose kids we are. We are to see our identity in Christ. And as we do, we go out and we show a dark world light. Instead, it says they don't hide it under a bowl. How hard and heartbreaking it is that people stumble around every day, getting hurt, getting wounded, falling over themselves for the lack of light to walk. I believe that while many people believe that people have turned their back on God or the light, that there are many people that are just suffering because they don't know the truth. It's our job to show the light, to shed light so they can see the truth. Not to oppressively come at people with the gospel, but to show light by the way that we live. Does your life reflect to the world, show the world a way to live? He goes on to say, in the same way, let your light shine before others so they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So what do we do? I mean, he doesn't give a clear instruction about what to do and all the little list of things that we're to do as we go live out our life, because we already are the salt and the light. The reality is that we operate from that identity, not what we do here. When we recognize that we are salt and we live out our life in a way that preserves, that is valuable in the culture around us, that is valuable to the people around us, that shows light, then we can just literally operate from who we are. But the problem is that many times we forget that we have the light and that it's our job to share it. And we can get selfish because we're in the know. And we expected everyone else to know what they don't know rather than operating humbly. So while we might like a list of 5 things to go do, the reality is that what God is calling us to do is to operate from who we already are in Him. When we enter into our life defeated with the idea of who we used to be, or who God or who others have said that we are, or the lies that we've taken upon ourselves, we sell ourselves short and we cover up. As a matter of fact, I believe that many of us miss the boat because we don't live out of what God has called us. We continue to live out of what others have said about us. And the world actually needs us, even in our weakness, to shed light. So I want to ask you this question that you may have been asked as a child. What do you want to be? As you go and as you go as the salt and the light out into the world, how this week can you take this identity that you're of great value, have great purpose and many uses as God's people to bring hope to people in the darkness, to invite people to the table with you. I want to invite you, if you watch us online and you live here in Putnam County, I want to invite you just to get in the car and come over and be a part of Sunday morning. I want to invite you to get outside of your comfort zone. If you're a longtime Christ follower and you have the light, I want to encourage you to uncover the light that you have in Jesus, that Jesus has given you, by going out into the world and looking for ways that you can bring light into darkness. What do you want to be? Go be it. I love you and have a great week.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Are you ready to take your next step? We would love to hear from you. You can send an email to hello@bethel.us. You can send us a message on Facebook, or you can let us know in the Bethel app. And speaking of the Bethel app, take a moment, if you haven't already, to go to your app store and search Bethel Putco to download our app. There's all kinds of great resources in the app. You can listen to messages, you can view the messages from Sunday morning, and you can also fill out a digital Connect card. You can do that today and each week to let us know that you're tuning in. You can also find some great information about our Bethel Kids Ministry and our Be the One student ministries. Also in the app, you can give. It's one of 3 ways you can give: with online giving at bethel.us/give, in our app, Bethel Putco, or through text. Hey, thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a great day and know that you are loved.